We plan again. We plan again. They came back to fields half wild, grass waist high where roads once ran. Hands pull weeds from open soil, bent to clear the rows again. Egomacy, the hardy kind, oil to press and leave behind. Smile, stay fixed, the weather clear. No one says what lingers here. Fukushima farming, hey, hey. Eagle miles what we sow. Yeah. It thrives where nothing else will grow. Fukushima farming, press for oil, for skin, for trade. Hey. Curium traced in every spade. The ground still tells what we all know. Sing it bright and let it go, 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 go. This ground once grew the paddy rice. Left alone it turned to weeds. Stalks lay flat, beds went dry. No one came to plant or feed. Now Egoma fills the bed. Signs declare the land repaired. They start again from lifted band. Yeah. Lost time folded in their plans. Fukushima farming, hey, hey. Egoma is what we sow. Yeah. It thrives where nothing else will grow. Fukushima farming, woo. Press for oil, for skin, for trade. Hey. Curium traced in every spade. The ground still tells what we all know. Sing it bright and let it go. Go, 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 go. Blue tarps flutter over plots. Elder hands that seed and slide. Seed tray stacked beside the path. Quiet talk of what they had. They check the soil, they test the air, then walk away. It's all still there. No one asks what still remains. No, no, no. Fukushima farming, hey, Egoma's what we sow. Yeah, yeah. It thrives when nothing else will grow. Fukushima farming, woo. Press for oil, for skin, for trade. Hey. Curium traced in every spade. The ground still tells what we all know. Sing it bright, it's Fukushima farming. Yeah. Yeah. Fukushima farming. We plan again. No limit, no limit. We plan again. We plan again.
That was awesome. It was totally different, eh? Wow. Fukushima farming. I don't know how the man does it, but I guess all these catchy beats and tunes and different genres. It's pretty sweet, man. Very fortunate. So that song is about the first story we're going to cover tonight, actually. I mean, James is on the same page. So there's a story that just came out. Hope everybody's doing okay tonight, except for the farmers from Fukushima. Hard cases, boy. Growing food in a nuclear wasteland. Should farmers growing food in a nuclear wasteland be shot to save millions of people and children from radiation poisoning and death? Well, like, these farmers, each of these farmers can kill millions of people in their lifetime from radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland. The whole world, all the bloggers, all the alternative media out there with their thumbs up to friggin' horses don't care. Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know what kind of genre that music would go into. It's very unique. Every sound about it was unique. Gotta love it. So you see farmers up here harvesting food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation, right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. These are abandoned communities where they're doing it because of radiation. And in that community right there, growing a new future, Fukushima farming village strives to survive. Oh, the poor serial killers are striving to survive. And I'm sure they're great people, but you can't go murdering millions of people because you're stupid. Ignorance is not an excuse for committing crimes against humanity. Are you paying attention, nuclear industry? The nuclear industry is not ignorant on top of that. They're, like, see all the forests right there, for instance, right? So what they done in Japan was they picked up the top 2 centimeters and 3/4 of an inch. Go try picking up 3/4 of an inch of topsoil and tell me how retarded that actually is. It can't be done. And picking up topsoil and saying you're decontaminating communities and farmland is not even, there's no logic there. There's no science to that. And then convincing the idiots to go back into a nuclear wasteland because they've been fed so much propaganda by your universities and your medias. Like, what a nightmare. How is this even possible? I was so angry today over this. I had different poles should be dropped into wood chippers, thrown off cliffs and skyscrapers. I settled for should be shot. Should be snipers whacking these people as a deterrent so other farmers don't go there and grow food in a nuclear wasteland. Growing food in a nuclear wasteland. You got any concept of how insane that statement actually is? Yeah, James nailed it. They got the elderly out there because they're uneducated. They wish they could be back in their homes that they paid for already. They've been there their whole lives, and their parents probably own the land. That's a great point, actually. I know it's a little harsh to say should they be shot, but how do you draw attention to it without being harsh? Should they be given a spanking on their hands, told not to do it no more? Should they have to go to the funerals of all the people that were eating their food? Should they have to live in the cancer wards of the hospitals for the rest of their life so they can appreciate the enormity of what they're actually doing? You like to say the same thing about nuclear scientists, but they'd be there poking the dead people with a stick. They're so disconnected. Lydia, I'm going to call her Lydia because I don't speak Japanese and I couldn't care less. It's a nuclear wasteland. A Fukushima nuclear wasteland village hit hard by the nuclear disaster. They have so much arrogance, the journalists and academics and universities, they refuse to even frame it appropriately, has seen its population dwindle and grow grayer. And what about the victims that are going to eat the food from the nuclear wasteland? Any of these headlines you're going to see are that community. New studies on mysterious black substances released. So they only picked up the topsoil, which was pointless, by the way, 3% of the land, farmland, and communities. Nothing is picked up in the forest. And so every time it rains, those fields are recontaminated, even if you did manage to clean it up, which you can't. Like, when you're growing food right alongside of 1 ton bags in a nuclear wasteland for sale, you missed the boat on common sense. You dropped the ball. When a journalist who published both of these are Japanese stories, chastising people for harming the farmers who are just trying to make a living, poisoning everybody on the planet. And it's hard to comprehend how much we're talking about. Food gets grown there and how much people can be poisoned. But you're talking about a billion pounds for each of the 14 prefectures that were banned by 55 countries because of radioactive fallout. And they're just shipping it to other countries. But they've already destroyed their own country. They had 865,000 extra cancers in the first year. Fuel core material. Fuel core material, say if it's particles or something, is still splitting. Each of those particles are splitting atoms. So if you take those particles, you put it in a bag of rice, it's splitting atoms until you buy it and eat it. It's still going to be splitting atoms rapidly. But by the time it gets to Canada or United States or wherever, the entire bag is destroyed by radiation. It's like I feel like I'm an idiot because I'm complaining about genocide because nobody else is doing it. Like there's this group of us, but that's it. I feel like we're bad people for interfering in a genocide and mass murder of everybody on the planet because nobody will acknowledge it. The universities are okay with it. In fact, you couldn't do it without the media and the universities' participation. So sometimes you kind of feel like you're schizophrenic because what's so difficult about this, right, being wrong? How is this difficult to appreciate that it's wrong? I'm going to start selling punching bags that look like nuclear scientists for kicks. At some point, they're going to be a big seller. You know that. Plutonium, uranium-236, which you don't really hear of very often. It's a nasty isotope, by the way. Curium discharges into the environment, likely in the form of fine particles. And those fine particles, because they're from the fuel, are going to be split in atoms for millions of years, spread over your entire planet. It's truly a planet killer. That's what this radioactive fallout of this particular type is. And if you're concerned, apparently, according to the people that are covering up, you're by proxy a bad person. I'm not a bad person. You're not a bad person for caring. You're the best humans imaginable because you actually care. Because you have some moral compass. Bear with me here. I forgot. I thought I had the other computer. The other, the new one we put here is already broken down. I'm going to have to ship it back, I guess. I can't get it to work. And so I don't have the bookmarks on this one that I'm looking for. Okay, let's keep going. Which is hard for me to comprehend, really, because I'm pretty good. Plutonium, uranium-236, curium, which is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rod, and need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Discharged into the environment, likely in the form of fine particles that are splitting atoms. You're talking about that community. All of these stories I'm going to show you right now are about that community, where the farmers are. Plutonium was detected all over the village with a 240,000-year life from the plant. Something terrible, dreadful is happening. Oh, you have no idea, buddy. The mayor, please don't tell this to the residents. We want them to come back so we can have our jobs again. This is how stupid we actually become. You think by now after all this evolution or something, whatever you want to call it, we wouldn't be this complacent on the planet, but the nuclear industry, through SpongeBob and The Simpsons and Spider-Man and the Hulk, have dumbed down the planet sufficiently have taken over the universities in the median increments since the Manhattan Projects and during the Manhattan Projects. That whole story is incredible on its own. There was a secrecy law enacted at the universities during the Manhattan Project that's still in place today. And they had tens of thousands of spies spying on the scientists. And they had tens and tens of thousands of spies spying on the spies and the scientists that the spies were spying on. That's still going strong today, right? That's a real money basket. And it's under a Secrecy Act in Canada, the United States, and I'm sure many other countries. It's not a nuclear accident. You built the reactors on a fault line or on the tectonic plates with, less than 100 kilometers from the tectonic plates. That's the equivalent of building it on the tectonic plates. With a 3,000-year legacy of massive earthquakes and tsunamis up to 300 feet high. There's markings on the walls in Japan that are hundreds of years old saying, don't build your house below this level, 300 feet above sea level. After the nuclear accident, all over Lydia Village, plutonium, strontium were detected 40 kilometers from the plant. Well, Fukushima City, this story is the most insane, frustrating story imaginable, because we come here as often as we can to educate the population to fight so their loved ones and their friends and their families and future generations and a few species can have some kind of a future. The people that support this and that stand side by side and will be remembered in history as probably the only people that had a conscience, among many other incredible attributes. Like, what you're doing is so special. And we're such a tiny group of people in a sea of people on this planet. And the industry has worked diligently to get to this point. This was always the plan. Was to poison every species, all the water in particular, fresh and salt water. That's definitely an agenda. And I can't imagine how many of you are exhausted after all these years and this incredible amount of work you've put in, and just the hopes and dreams and just the nightmares you've had. I can't imagine it, because I know what I've been through, and it sure as hell ain't been a cakewalk. It's been a disaster, and we're just trying to do a moral and ethical thing for Earth. They keep telling us it's okay, it's safe, there's nothing to worry about. That's your universities, your medias, everybody else. Let me see if we can find that community. So the communities are to your left that have been abandoned by the industry and the government and the nuclear power companies and everybody else. And have been, you can see the tens of thousands in the second row of the communities, people in the communities. And then you can see where they only acknowledge cesium-137. There's 1,000 other isotopes that you have to take in consideration. You absolutely, positively, unequivocally have to take into consideration when it comes to this kind of event we're talking about, that are completely ignored and are actually shunned. So Fukushima City, which is 70 kilometers away, is 230,000 counts per million per square meter of just cesium-137, as if that's the only isotope. So Iwaki City, no, that's not the right place, is it? Just bear with me. What was the name of that community? Lydia, with L, Dana. Because we cover so much, you get kind of lost sometimes. Not even listed here. Not listed for some reason. Koriyama City is the same distance. In fact, Koriyama City is further, same as Fukushima City. So all of these communities, people have been abandoned and then manipulated into growing food to poison everybody else on the planet. What part about that is that how is the people in the nuclear industry, the plebes of the nuclear industry, the people that work in the nuclear industry, how can they be so, all of them, be so heartless to let this continue? The village of Lydia is located in the hilly northeast of Fukushima Prefecture, 30 to 40 kilometers from the nuclear meltdowns. Not the Tokyo Electric Power Company, but the nuclear meltdowns, you parasite who wrote that. Immediately after the accident, the government issued evacuation orders for people within a 20-kilometer radius. And Lydia received an influx of evacuees from Fukuba or Kuma, which are south and north of the nuclear meltdowns, and other municipalities. Later, radioactive material from the reactor was carried northeast by the wind, and Lydia was found to have serious levels of radioactive contamination. Not later. It's like saying you have a snowstorm in the community next to you, but you don't get it for 3 or 4 days because the nuclear industry said you don't. Would you accept that story? Because like if you walk out your door and you see snow everywhere, you're not going to accept it, but you can't walk outdoors and see the radiation everywhere. Serious levels of radioactive contamination. They abandoned the city, which means you can never go back. You don't abandon it. The reason they abandoned it, they didn't want people dropping dead all over the place that they couldn't account for through any radioactive fallout. It was all about protecting the nuclear industry's perception than it is about protecting anything or anybody or any species or any air or water or land or anything else. I thank each and every one of you that has the courage to ask the question, is this sensible? Send us people that don't mind dying. How many nuclear scientists do you think volunteered worldwide? How many nuclear power plants workers worldwide volunteered to go to Fukushima? Well, that's right, none. How many universities volunteered to go there? Oh, that's right, none worldwide. Because they know better. You know, Japan had 54 reactors. You know, hundreds of thousands of employees. None of them went there because they're not stupid. But don't worry, Dana. It's all good. We'll trick the farmers into living back into the nuclear wasteland. Despite its relative distance from the reactors, these conditions forced the evacuation of the entire town. By distance is jack shit. If you put distance into the equation, it's nothing when it comes to radioactive fallout. It's ground zero. The entire country is ground zero. There should be war crimes tribunals, crimes against humanity tribunals. These people should be dealt with the most severe penalties that we carry out on this planet. They're going to exterminate all the species and you because you won't stop them, you won't speak up, you won't hold them accountable, you won't fight back. Look at the censorship on me, 13 people on my show. You got any idea how retarded that actually is? The most important subject in history? You got any idea what a coward is? He works in university, they call themselves professors. The cowards of the cowards. You know, I just lost the phone, right? I lost the website. I haven't got a website after 10 years. I can't afford to do that because the industry's chased almost everybody away. I probably won't even have a pension at the end of this month. I don't know if I will. I still got to try to fight, though, every opportunity I got. All the stress I got, the unbelievable stress. And the harassment and the demonization and the attacks upon me have been just unprecedented worldwide. I'm actually not a bad person. I know that sounds crazy. If you listen to the nuclear industry, you go out and listen to the stuff people say about me. But I can't let any of that interfere. No matter how stressful I am, I still got to kind of try to find a way to come out and tell this story as often as I can in the hopes that the world gets educated. Desperation. The evacuation order came roughly a month after the accident, so everybody was poisoned. You got any idea how evil that statement is? There's no reason that these people should be shot. I don't believe in the death penalty per se, but I've come around. A month after, just heartless. The industry has absolutely zilch. Zero remorse. And they're out to slaughter everything. They're out to murder everything. And they do it the most cowardly way, the cowardly way we've ever heard of. Right there. That's the wrong one. Sorry. Here we go. What we're seeing happening worldwide is unprecedented. Neptunium-239 covers the entire planet, and the model is 20 days. It's not based upon the actual losses of the inventories, the nuclear meltdowns themselves. The farmers are growing, they never stopped growing food in a nuclear wasteland. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. Can you wrap your mind around that statement? 30 million one-ton bags? 30 million one-ton bags was 3% of Fukushima prefecture. Here's the farmers growing food right alongside of one-ton bags of radiation fallout that they call decontamination. You can't decontaminate an environment anyway, but you certainly can't do it by picking up the top 2 centimeters of topsoil. Go out with a shovel and try to scratch up 2 centimeters of topsoil. I don't know, it's worse than that, right? They burned the radiation. What they picked up for one-ton bags is just a fraction of what they actually burnt and dumped into the rivers and the shorelines. The homeless and the destitute, the victims of society that worked there. Just in Fukushima City, they had 3,000 of these fake Geiger counters that measured it in microsieverts instead of actual counts per minute, which is what you're supposed to measure, right? To trick people into staying there. Like, to call this industry evil worldwide, it doesn't come close to doing it justice. Why ain't this planet fighting back? Playing past the parcel with Fukushima, 2016. 30 million tons will eventually be moved to another third-level interim storage facility. And if you follow the subject at all, the interim storage facilities in Fukushima and Okuma, right, where they got 14 million one-ton bags. The bags deteriorate after 3 years. So 30 million one-ton bags in 2016. They didn't stop picking up radiation in 2016. Right? The cover story, has to slow down. In 2019, they had 105,000 sites. And look at the deception. Conspicuous objects covered by green sheets found in parking lots in front of other houses. They show you this picture here. The bags are round, they're not square. The bags are round, they're not square. That's not an actual picture, but the media is so deceptive and disgusting and hateful and despicable. It's despicable to do that. In fact, the bags are growing plants. Radioactive pollen covering the entire planet, let alone Japan. And you had 865,000 cancers, extra cancers in the first year. Lydia was found to have serious levels of radioactive contamination. So why are you back there growing food? You worthless, disgusting parasites. The entire nuclear core injected into the environment. It was 9 reactor cores ejected or burnt up in all 4 buildings, each of the 4 buildings, I'm sorry. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings. Hang on here. This is such an important story. Last night's show was incredibly important on top of that. There's no such thing as a non-important story when you're pointing out what the nuclear industry has done and continues to do. Encyclopedia Britannica are lunatics, to say the least. Bear with me here now. I want to cover these people are insane. I can't keep up with the madness this industry in one day puts out. But to say these are vicious, blood-sucking, sadistic monsters? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Encyclopedia Britannica just updated their story again. We've covered the lies in the story. You can't possibly do a 3-hour video and cover all the lies they put out in a single story. Just come out again. Now we covered this a while back, a month or 2 ago. We called them out. I think we done a whole show on it or something. Fact checked by Encyclopedia Britannica. So officially, this never happened according to Encyclopedia Britannica. You're not going to see this picture anywhere else on the planet. That alone scares the shit out of me. Older spent fuel cooling pools are able to accommodate only about 10 years worth of spent fuel. 10 years. The reactors are 30 plus years old, but they changed the law so they can put more in it. Typically, a reactor is fueled in cycles lasting 1 to 2 years. So let's say 14 months. At 14 months, because you can't just move the fuel out of the building, you got to put it in another fuel pool and keep it there for a decade or 2 for it to cool down. You bring fuel out every 12, 14 months. 1/3 of the reactor core is typically what you're going to remove. The oldest fuel is removed at the end of each cycle, about 1/3 of fuel content in the core. So over 1 decade, you're looking at around 5 reactor cores plus per reactor building. And because the reactor buildings were over 30 years old each, and you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, and you can't just remove everything out of the fuel pool and put it somewhere else, because they're old, right? So the common spent fuel pool is already overly packed, just like all these Mach 1 reactors. United States has 70 of them. The evacuation orders, so back to that story. So you're talking about at the top of each of the buildings was a minimum of around 8 reactor cores. There's 2 fuel pools at the top of each of the buildings, plus the reactor cores in the building. So 9 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings is a pretty conservative, low ball estimate. We know there's a lot of fuel that is damaged and they can't take it out of the fuel pools ever. That's standard practice in every nuclear power plant. The fuel that's in the pool, by the way, is splitting atoms. So when you pop it right out of the building, that's going to catch fire, and the fine particles are just going to keep replicating. They're going to keep splitting atoms. This thing just grows till it buries the entire planet in radioactive fallout. The whole story is nuts. And now they take it to a whole different level of nuts. The madness, it's madness. The stories are absolutely madness. You can't keep up with the madness. So just let me try to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. So you see that explosion? Well, think about it. In the United States, it counts for 450,000 times above detection levels of xenon-133 persisted for weeks. You can't have xenon-133 without xenon-135, for instance. Radiation spiked on the U.S. West Coast to 1 million times normal. High concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest, including plutonium and americium. This was a model of the Pacific Ocean by 2013. 954 days. But the plume covered the whole planet, all the fresh water, all the salt water, in just 20 days or so. It's 500 trillion atoms a kilogram. A Becquerel is an explosion. It's just like an explosion. It's like a hand grenade. But it blows holes in your DNA, your chromosomes, your cells, birds, mammals, animals, all the species, whales, elephants, you name it. The body tries to repair that damage every second and attack the source. And it does that with white blood cells. When you're doing, and then that's forever. So your body has to produce these white blood cells to attack the damage, which you can't keep up with, and the source, which you can't keep up with, every second for the rest of your life by producing a massive amount of white blood cells. And so every white blood cell is displacing a red blood cell carrying oxygen nutrition, so you have a compromised immune system. The birds have a compromised immune systems. The species all have compromised immune systems. And they're producing radioactive hormones, anthropogenic man-made radioactive hormones, and anthropogenic man-made radioactive stem cells. And as you bioaccumulate more, it's much worse. And so you're producing more, eventually, at this stage, a lot of us are producing more white blood cells than our body can. You need a certain amount of oxygen in your body to survive, right? And so, same with the species. This is what we're seeing in species. And the species are becoming sterilized because they're at the bottom of the food chain, right? And they're more susceptible to pathogens and viruses, the same as you, because your body's producing so many white blood cells. This is why we're seeing the whales are emaciated. There's still food out there, But why are all the whales emaciated? Because they can't uptake nutrition. Because they're producing, they don't have enough red blood cells. They're producing so much white blood cells to attack the attacker that's in their body to try to mitigate it. But your body, that's your body's trigger against radiation is to attack it with white blood cells. And that's not a good, it's like if you cut your finger, your body does that for 4 or 5 days and repairs it, and then your red blood cell counts come back up. When you got anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout in your body, and you do, and just because this is in Tokyo, don't mean you didn't get that in Canada and the United States, the same numbers, because you did. And the reason it's so high because it's fuel particulates, and they're splitting atoms. So eventually, at some point, this kills everything on the planet. All the fungus and the bacteria, all the biota, and we're well underway. 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain in Canada, United States. This was a Ottawa, Canada study with a 50 million year half-life. You're saturating the thyroid glands of every species, for sure, minimum. And you don't just have iodine. The biggest byproduct is not iodine, by the way. It's curium, and curium is nasty. The model to your left is 20 days of radioactive fallout of plutonium-239. The model to your left is 20 days of neptunium-239. Neptunium decays to plutonium. After 2.5 days, 50%. And so there's 10 different decays, and it's all decayed to plutonium. Plutonium has a 24,000-year half-life with 10 half-lives, 240,000 years. Yeah, I'm feeling a bit better, Warrior, thank you. Not my best, though, I must admit. I wasn't sure I was going to get a show tonight, but it's such an important show. I said, I'm just going to suck it up and do it anyway. So I look like I'm a little bit off, and it's because I'm a lot off. And I'm only expecting to get like a 1 hour show in again tonight. And I slept twice today. I don't like this at all. On a good note, since the government shut down the United States, we're getting lots of sunshine, no chemtrails. I don't know if anybody noticed that. We're getting beautiful sunshine I've never seen here in 5 years. And scattered fluffy cloud. It's usually chemtrails by 7, 8 a.m., right? And it's cold. So right now, tonight it's going to be -1 or something. And it's insane. I can't turn the heat on. I can't afford it. Don't even know if we're going to have a home in 2 weeks. Going to be living in a tent in the woods in 2 weeks. I don't know. I got no idea what's going on. The industry screwed me so bad. We haven't had the boat in the water in 2 years. We can't get a motor. We can't afford to fix. The motors I got has been to Alaska 6 times, for goodness sakes. For 4 to 5 months at a time, each year for 6 years. You know, I can't believe the motor lasted as long as it did. Bless its heart for doing what it done. That motor was incredible, right? That we got the most vital research imaginable that showed we have an extinction event. We went back year after year to see if the species recovered. I was trying to make the show as complicated as I can, I guess. Why not? So we've done research expeditions for 6 years. And it's madness. They're trying to keep the whole operation has always been a nightmare. Just keeping the whole operation moving forward all these years has been, that's typical weather right there. But to keep this operation, just to build the operation, to get it out on the ocean, has been just a perpetual nightmare. It's just a perpetual nightmare. And the idea was we were trying to find out, because the first year we went out, we discovered the species to your left are exterminated. So we had to go back year after year to see if the species to the left recovered. So the pictures behind me are the pictures I took. And this is a quick and dirty version of the research. So the species to your left is what is everywhere, the entire coastline. And, you know, what would you rather have, the species to your left or nuclear power? Small modular reactors that don't exist. What a disgusting, this is disgusting, a revolting industry. It's a revolt. The people in the industry are revolting. They're actual parasites. They're actual cockroaches. It's the only way you can describe them. And like I meet any of them, that's what they're going to be called. They're going to be called parasites and cockroaches. They'll get no respect from me, I can tell you that much. They'll get no quarters from Dana. I'm not afraid of anything on this planet. I'm certainly not afraid of anybody in the nuclear industry, I can tell you that much. And I can't pretend that the research expeditions don't matter. I can't do that. I can't pretend the species are still there. I can't pretend that Fukushima didn't happen. I don't live in that idiot planet that they do. I can't pretend for 2 seconds that all of my friends, those species, didn't have the same right to be on the planet as anybody in the nuclear industry. I don't see why the people in the nuclear industry should be allowed to exist. I don't see why they should be allowed to grow a day older. I certainly don't agree that they should be allowed to breed the same air as me and you and the species. They have abrogated their rights by sentencing humanity to a brutal extermination. So we went back for 6 years. The species are permanently gone. They didn't recover. That's an extinction event. And the only way that this story could work is if the nuclear industry controls the media and the universities and key positions in government. That's the only way it can work. And it has to be symmetrically worldwide. And that's exactly what they've done. And the people that are capable of fighting for this planet, the big alternative medias, are too busy feeding the people looking for some serious news with everything but this. In fact, you know, like I don't understand David Icke. He had Arnie Gunnarsson on there, who's just a brutal lawyer, and Helen Caldicott. He publishes their stuff, but they're going to tell you the lies. That's their job. They're the apologists for the industry. Helen Caldicott wrote 14 anti-nuclear books on top of that. So Helen Caldicott and Arnie Gunnarsson say the fuel pools are still intact at the top of both of these buildings that don't exist. And Arnie built the fuel racks for the reactor core assemblies for those fuel pools for 70 identical reactors in the United States. Let's play a couple of those clips. Bizarre clips. This is Arnie. Arnie's going to tell you TEPCO went into this building. I'll go back to it for 1 second. He's done this, Helen Caldicott done hundreds of interviews where she claimed that they got the fuel out of the pool at the top of these buildings. I'm going to play one of those clips for you in a second. Here's degenerate Arnie Gunnarsson. Now, I put his video where one of the fuel pools in Reactor 4 would be.
Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred. And it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
So the fuel pools are at the top of the building. When you look at the building to your left, you realize that part of the building is missing. He's claiming they went in there. Now remember, this is 2012 pictures. Arnie has no excuses not to know, because he built the racks for the fuel assemblies for the reactor cores in the fuel pools for 70 identical reactors. Here's Helen, the monster Caldecott. She done hundreds of interviews like this.
Building 4 is also similarly fragile, and it's got a huge cooling pool on top with all its fuel rods, but they have been removing them. And it's been a very delicate procedure, and they've removed almost all. So if that collapsed now, I think it would probably be okay.
This is a lunatic. That's reactor 4. And she's not stupid. She wrote 14 anti-nuclear books on top of that, right? She's not stupid. She's not naive. She got asked, actually. Let's play one of those clips. She got put on the spot. There we go.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from...
So I put these 2 pictures left and right are pictures I put there. The square box at the top is the original video of an interview asking her, does it reactor 4 look like this or does it look like that? Oh, you know what she's going to say. She just told you they got the fuel from the top of the building to the right.
Boston. Think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
But it doesn't. It can't. It never did after, and never will. You can't rebuild something there, for instance, because it's nuclear meltdown for starters. But you can't rebuild it and say that everything is intact on top of that, right? There's no logic. But we're talking about nuclear, so there's zero logic. You got Arnie Gunnarsson telling you they went in to the fuel pools at 150 feet above the stump, or 100 feet above the stump, and put supports under the fuel pool. At a nuclear meltdown, multiple nuclear reactors melting down in the same buildings. It's madness. And what's mad is that the world is too busy fighting about everything. Right, they got all the energy in the world to come out and yell about Trump, Magna or whatever. They got all the energy to get involved in all kinds of different political stories. The worst people are the ones that are out there worshiping the so-called Hollywood Muppets, right? The so-called celebrities. Like if you're a Hollywood star, so-called star, and you're what you call a celebrity because you were in a stupid movie for 1 hour movie or 2 hour movie, somehow that makes you better than everybody else on the planet because you're wealthy. And that the people that adore you have zero lives at all. They have no concept of life. They have zero lives. History will never remember them for anything because they've done nothing their entire lives and will never do nothing their entire lives because they're very vulnerable. They're the drones of society, so to speak, right? The useful idiots of society. And so the so-called celebrities, the people that adore them, are irrelevant. They're irrelevant. They're not adored by anybody with a moral compass or common sense or... Right? They live this incredible fantasy. And you've got all these politicians, none of them are concerned about it. They're all forced to promote nuclear. They're all forced to get on one knee and kiss the ring of whoever got the nuclear industry, like Raphael Grossi or whatever. This is not a society. And now we have compromised and jeopardized the future of humanity and the species. This is imminent. We are now in a sixth extinction event. If you watch my video from yesterday, you know what I say is true. If you've been here regularly, you already know. If you go to my playlist and look at the die-off videos, you'll get it right quick if you're not familiar. It's an exhausting thing that we do here. It's exhausting. And it's necessary. And there's nothing I would rather do. There's nothing more important on this planet than to fight for the planet, fight for you and your loved ones, your friends, your families, and the species. There's nothing more important to me. This is what I think about, and this is what I do, and this is what I live, breathe, eat every second of my life, every day of my life. I'm dedicated. There's nothing can sway me. There's nothing will stop me. As long as I'm alive, I'll be pushing back, educating the population. And it's a very humble thing that we do. It's an impossible task. The odds are bigger than any odds anybody's ever faced in history. You're fighting for the existence of a planet and a species, and you're losing the incredible ground all day, every day. But you still have to, and you're limited to what you can do, so you do the best you can, but you're still doing something. And the industry is terrified of you because of that. They're horrified. They're mortified that their friends, their families, their loved ones will find out what they're really like, who they really are, what their real agenda is. And they can't face the fact that they're the cowards that they know they are. They hide away in all kinds of denial because they work for an industry that only hires those types of people that are capable of existing in that environment. Right? They're vetted heavily before they get a job in the nuclear industry. You know, when you look at all the studies, you're talking about tens of millions of studies on food and plants and the biotas and everything from radiation harm, radiation damage. These academics, they're not doing it to warn you or to help Earth. They're doing it for the nuclear industry to cover up what they're doing. They covered every base you can imagine. And they were literally have never been challenged in their history. Legitimately challenged. That's a worthy opponent. But they're cowards. They're not actual opponents. They're not going to face you. They're not going to square off with you. That's for sure. They're not going to debate you. They can't win the debate, and they know that. They know there's zero possibility they can win a debate with anybody that has any kind of insight. And if you come from my neck of the woods, they have zero possibility of winning a debate with you. Zero, zilch. And that keeps them up at night. It terrifies them all the time. They just never thought that would ever happen to them. They thought they covered every base. They did. We're an abnormality. We're a glitch in the matrix. We're literally a glitch in the matrix in every sense of that word, too. And we just keep showing up, and we keep pushing back, and we keep educating the population. We keep it honest. We're very sincere. We're very genuine. They don't have those attributes. They're evil and sadistic and malicious and sneaky and scoundrels. They're detestable. They're the epitome of everything wrong with humanity. If you're sadistic and evil, the nuclear industry, the despicable nuclear industry, will hire you in a heartbeat. You got to get an education, you got to have degrees, and then they'll work you till you die. Your job is to get out and deceive, deceive, and deceive. You got to be spineless and disgusting. You got to have all the attributes of a terrorist, of a monster, of a vile, obnoxious, despicable, hideous, gross, spineless, atrocious, wicked, sinister scumbag. And you'll get a job in the nuclear industry. They'll be happy to have you. And they'll pay you well. You'll live like a king. And if you got a morsel of humanity in you, they'll breed that out of you. All these years, these fraudsters, these felons, these thieves, these terrorists, these are terrorists, these graceful, despicable, unforgivable, shameful terrorists, obnoxiously awkward. These are awkward people on top of that. Older spent fuel cooling pools are able to accommodate only about 10 years worth of spent fuel. So they just changed the law so they can store more there. So they would have had at least 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings that don't exist anymore. Each of these reactor cores, by the way, are at least 100 Chernobyls. And the reason is because Chernobyl was a small reactor. It was a graphite reactor. It was a new reactor. It didn't have decades of reactor cores or any reactor core stored in the buildings besides the original reactor core. Japan's reactors were over 30 years old each. They had decades of reactor cores. They're pure uranium, pure plutonium. And so each reactor core, and there's around 9 at the top of each of the buildings that is lost into the environment, and splitting atoms, the particulates worldwide. Or equal to 100 Chernobyls, each of the reactors. You're looking at around 3,600 to 4,000 Chernobyls in plutonium and uranium and americium and neptunium and strontium and all the other isotopes. And the reason that the poll is the way it is tonight is to try to bring the gravity of this situation to bear. The farmers are going to poison and kill millions of people every year, hundreds of millions, if you look at all the prefectures. How is that for 1 second, for 1 iota, rational? How is that able to slip past? Well, because they have enormous amount of money. They can pay people off. So the problem, and it's well known, with food is that the food sucks up, like grapevines is known to suck up the radiation. It's very established that plants are a vector for radiation poisoning of every species. So the meadows, the foliage. So the foliage uptake of cesium and strontium is not just that there's only cesium and strontium. That's the only ones that can get funding for it. And strawberries. So, don't eat grapes. You can't eat grapes. You can't eat strawberries. That's what they're telling you there. Can't eat any plants. That's what they're telling you. You can't eat tomato plants. You can't eat potatoes. You can't eat fruit trees because they suck up the radiation. You have to worry about every species, the wheat. You have to worry about the entire ecosystem because now we've contaminated it. It was going to happen anyway from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide splitting atoms into the environment. Yeah, some farmers, that's right, some farmers quit. Lots of farmers quit. But lots of people were naive and refused to get educated, were incapable of getting educated, because wherever you try to go, unless you come here, the sad reality of it when it comes to educational programs, if you go somewhere else that has an educational program providing you information, is that you're not going to find anything sincere and genuine. You're going to find apologists. They mimic what we're doing, but they're feeding you the propaganda. They're lulling you into complacency. It's a terrifying story. About 1/3 of the fuel content in the core is taken out every 12, 14 months and put in the top of the buildings. So when those reactors blew up and lost the inventories at the top of their buildings, they lost at least 8 reactor cores, 9 reactor cores. They didn't evacuate people for it till a month later. It was huge. Like, it covered the whole planet in 20 days. What do you think it done to ground zero? Eight years now, this term was 8 years have passed since the lifting of the evacuation orders. So they lifted the evacuation orders after 6 years, despite the fact that nuclear meltdowns are still melting down, despite the fact that the radiation never goes away. All the species will be gone on this planet, and that radioactive fallout will still be here looking for something to destroy. There's no species on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. It is a weapon, it is a biological weapon of mass destruction against 8 million species, and we're just one of them. And we're not going to be spared. Some exclusion zones that remain in force, but the village has changed significantly. So there's still exclusion zones in Lydiate. You can't go across the street, Timmy, there's too much radiation. You got any idea how ludicrous that statement actually is? Pre-Fukushima, how insane that statement would be met worldwide? But post-Fukushima, the whole industry turned against humanity and the species. And for the worst way. And they're in a position to make it uninhabitable for us on this planet. That's what they've got done to you. And because it takes a few decades to play out, and there's lots of other events happening, so it's easy to blame it on that or this than it is on the actual boogeyman itself. And they want you to believe it's only this section that was affected. Like Tokyo was 29 million atoms just after a single rainfall a square meter of cesium-137, for instance. You should never go back to Tokyo with 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo. But you got to appreciate that this wasn't limited to Tokyo or Japan or the southern hemisphere or the northern hemisphere, rather, or the southern hemisphere. Japan government prepares plans to flee Tokyo as appropriate response, right? 300,000 atoms, so a Becquerel is a pulse of energy. You got to have an atom, anthropogenic man-made atom, to create that particular Becquerel. 300,000 atoms per square meter, and this is how they hide it from you, right? And anybody that you go and they're talking about millisieverts or microsieverts, just spit in their face and walk away from them, because that's what they want to do to you, but they're cowards from the nuclear industry, so they'll never do it. Of radioactive iodine, so how can you just have radioactive iodine? And because that got an 8-day half-life, right? So it's a great one to disarm people. I know lots of people were disarmed by that very statement. Oh, it's only got an 8-day half-life, it's already gone. Because there's so many zombies on the planet due to to the nuclear industry propaganda. Deposit in areas near Tokyo before the end of March. These people are insane. The best way to describe this industry is absolutely nut jobs. So pay no attention to this model. This means nothing. The idea of that was to lull you into complacency, into thinking that was the only damage. Canada, United States, I showed you earlier, was brutalized by radioactive fallout and by proxy the whole planet. No exceptions. And people can't comprehend why I might put a poll like that. They can't appreciate the enormity of how many millions of people will die because of those farmers. I'm not suggesting anybody should shoot the farmers. I'm just saying they should be shot. I'm not saying we're going to shoot them. I'm not saying it'll ever happen. You know it'll never happen. You know that's never going to happen. Nobody's going to go down and shoot the farmers, okay? But if you don't try, if you don't speak enough to cause the controversy, you can never have the conversation. And yes, they should be shot because it should be illegal for them to go in there, and there should be snipers from the Japanese government will shoot the farmers who won't stop growing food there. Because you're murdering people by feeding them food. They die later, or some of them die right away. Growing food in a nuclear wasteland is not an option. Eating the food from a nuclear wasteland should only be served to the pro-nuclear industry. The universities, the classes that are teaching nuclear should be forced to eat this stuff. Then you wouldn't have an issue. The International Atomic Energy Agency shouldn't be allowed to eat anything, only the stuff from the nuclear wasteland. A year before the accident, that is March 2010, Lydia had a population of 6,600. Now the population declined just over 30% to 4,400. So they tricked 4,400 people into going back into a nuclear wasteland. And just because you done that don't mean it was moral. That don't mean that they have that it was right. That doesn't mean that these people are not going to get sick, catastrophically sick from that exposure. What it means is the industry is evil, that they trick these people to go back into a nuclear wasteland. There is no excuse for it. They've done it so that the nuclear industry can get rid of a black eye called Fukushima. Workers are dumping radioactive waste from the Fukushima into the rivers at night. That's in Lydia. Narahara, Lydia, Tamura. Just dump it. Workers are the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. It's a coward industry that hires these people. That's a coward industry. That's not an industry that should exist for another second. And so they justify censoring me tonight because they say the farmers should be shot, right? But they know the farmers should be shot. They should be shot for censoring somebody trying to do the moral and ethical thing. 14 viewers, 26 likes. Do you think there's something wrong with that equation right there? And because you're so fearful, you actually got a couple of people downvoting. It's very unusual for us. They just usually leave us alone. But they're such cowards, they can't look at the mirror themselves. Over 180 microsieverts per hour. You can never live here. Well, each microsiever minimum is going to be 700 counts per minute. So multiply 700 by 180. Like, why would you count it in microsieverts when you're talking about actual radioactive fallout? Right, the ideal way to count it would be counts per second or counts per minute. Pulses of energy per second, which is a description of how many atoms there are floating around or in the food itself. To count it in microsieverts and millisieverts is unconscionable. Source, anonymous source, communities of 6,000 people were assumed to have evacuated from the, this is Lydia, from the high radiation area. They have not. Eventually happened 3 months after the meltdowns, 3 months. The government doctor came and said, okay, to eat the local food. Like, how do you get that evil that that's an option to go there and do that? I can play the clips of the doctors that done it, by the way. I have that. These are evil on a whole different level. They got the degree so they can do that. You get massive paychecks for being evil. They come out, talk to the media for 2 minutes. They go fishing. They charter a plane. They go to the best fishing places. They got helicopters and float planes and speedboats. And it's probably all paid for by the nuclear industry because they're so evil. Neptunium-239 finding 35 kilometers from Fukushima, published in the journal. It decays in the plutonium-239 after 2.5 days. The whole planet was covered in that. We showed you that earlier. So these are, I'm sure they're lovely people, but they're going to murder millions. Is it better to take out a few people than let millions each year be, tens of millions each year be murdered with radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland? You need a deterrent for serial killers. That's why they should be shot. As a deterrent to the other idiot, moron farmers that are going to go back to a nuclear wasteland and poison hundreds of millions of people each year. You need a deterrent. For grass cutting and other laborers' tasks, 10 to 20 people gather in a nuclear wasteland, including some who still live away from the community but came back. So you can't fix stupid. So the propaganda is so powerful in Japan that people actually go back to the nuclear wasteland despite the fact they know better. I get it. I understand how that works, by the way. That's what frightens me the most sometimes. A development corporation funded by the farming cooperatives in the village takes care of some fields to grow rice for stock feed. So rice for the milk cow, or grow rice for cows and stuff like that, pigs or whatever, for the meat and the milk. Well, that's going to murder people still. You can't justify growing food in a nuclear wasteland. There is no justification. And we need a deterrent so that other farmers don't do it. But as this year's harvest approaches, one thing is certain: the elderly residents who gather will, for the time being, continue to enjoy working actively and living in the nuclear wasteland. These people are insane. The journalist that wrote that story should be in jail for the rest of their lives. Highest level yet, soaring cesium levels in lydiate soil. It's so radioactive it would have to be buried in cement partitions. Why would you bury it? You store it for 1 million years. Why would you bury it where the water is going to permeate it and wash it into the ecosystem and the water tables? Cesium readings of 154,000 becquerels per kilogram in the soil. Well, you got to multiply that. $154,000. So what you got to do, that's per kilogram. So you got to 154,000. Multiply that by 66.6 to get a square meter. That's not me now, that's them. That's their numbers. There's 10 million atoms a square meter of just cesium. For every cesium-137, you're going to have 100 times strontium-90. So add another couple of zeros onto that. The biggest byproduct is not cesium or iodine, it's curium isotopes. And curium isotopes, you need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for plutonium. Plutonium killed all the animals. Government to focus on 8,000 square miles, most contaminated by the Fukushima fallout. Nobody really knows how to clean up the radiation, said the homeless guy. Bless their hearts. The victims of the nuclear industry. Economists, enormous spread of radiation, levels so high in the hills of Lydiate that the locals won't even go near it. 150,000 microsieverts a year outside the official's home. Imagine what it's like in the forest. And every time the wind blows through the forest, it covers the food they're grown in radioactive fallout. All the pollen from the trees is going to be radioactive fallout. All the pollen from the plants. All the plants are going to suck up the radiation, as I showed you earlier, the academic studies, how that work. Residents' urine, now radioactive, measuring at least 3,000 microsieverts in all 15 people tested in Lydiate, in the village of Lydiate, in the town of Kawamata, confirming internal radiation exposures. Radiation levels double within 20 days of decontamination. Well, it's not decontamination. Going in and scratching up to 2 centimeters, which is less than an inch, 2.5 centimeters in an inch, is not decontamination. I don't know what it is, but... Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days. After 93 days. Right, Dana? Thinker, Chuck, Colette. Hello, everybody. Kanito, Warrior. So when it comes to seafood, shellfish bioaccumulate radiation 125,000 times more than fish do. So avoid shellfish, mussels, clams, oysters, because they're microscopic filters, right? So if you want to get cancer, eat a bowl of that stuff. But everything is radioactive, anthropogenic, man-made poison now. Everything is. If you really want to eat seafood, go ahead and eat the seafood. The fish are nothing compared to mussels and scallops and abalones and little necks and manillas and razorback clams and stuff like that. The filter feeders are the most frightening thing imaginable. So if you really miss halibut, or you really miss codfish or flounder, like Colette was saying, I would go ahead and eat it once in a while. It's nothing compared to the shellfish. It's the same as eating anything else for the most part. Not entirely, of course. But like if you just eat it once a month or every 2 or 3 or 4 months or something like that, you don't have to eat a lot of it. Because it's crazy, right? Not eating. I was a big seafood eater my whole life. I used to eat on the ocean floor. I was a commercial diver. So when I went to work every day, if I was doing food harvesting, for instance, like sea urchins, I would eat 20 sea urchins a day on the ocean floor. And the reason I done that, because it's really good for you anyway, but because you wanted sweet uni for the stupid Japanese, because that's the basic market, is Japan, right? And you would have to eat it to make sure it was sweet, because if you sent bitter stuff to Japan, you might not even get paid. They would, they were paying you 30 cents a pound, and they were selling it in the sushi bars for $700 a pound. Just robbing you, right? Their whole legacy is based on that, by the way. I'm trying to recover. I don't know the industry got me destroyed. I'm still trying to maintain, still trying to push back, right? Still doing the best I can every day. That ain't gonna change. But it's difficult. And I knew this was coming. I knew they were gonna kick the shit out of me. They've arrested me and gave me gag orders, up to 6 gag orders at a time, for 3.5 years at a time. Right? They've done everything they can to destroy me, and they basically have already destroyed me. Particularly, like, my reputation worldwide is already destroyed through their 1,000 public relation firms. But that's not going to stop me or sway me. It's just going to reinforce that I'm right over the target, and that they're fueled. What they do to me is just fuel to keep me running. Like, if Calm Down Charlie didn't attack me the way he did, I probably would have gave up. Calm Down Charlie is the reason I'll never go away, among many other reasons. But he's one of the reasons I'll never go away, because of what he done to me. And the people that have been stalking me here and in BC, that stuff doesn't leave me, right? I'm not naive, I'm not gullible, I'm not uneducated, I'm not stupid. I don't spread disinformation. I'm completely honest, because it's an educational program. And I worked my arse off on those research expeditions, and they haunt me. They haunt me forever. When I walk out my door, here's my boat looking at me. That boat's been on 6 trips to Alaska, 4 to 5 months at a time. So I never forget. I can't look at my window without seeing that. And I put that right there so I would always stare at it, so I could never forget the species. I am gone to war. And everybody in the nuclear industry knows that. I don't hide that fact. That's a fact. I am gone to war against this industry, and always have been. Long before Fukushima happened, I was gone to war against this industry. But what we've seen after Fukushima is unconscionable. It's unconscionable. And the industry are such cowards. It's the strangest thing the one thing that really amazes me is how cowardly these people actually are. Like, it's really special how incredibly coward each of these people are. In the nuclear industry, we've never seen anybody in the nuclear industry that was stoic. You won't find them. They don't exist. Alrighty. James just put out a new video a little while ago. We're going to enjoy that. I'm going to call it a night. I will cry myself to sleep again. And get up and do it again tomorrow night. We'll be back tomorrow night. My tears are all dried. But I will never, ever give up trying. I will never give. Even if I'm living in a tent in the woods in 2 weeks' time, I'll still be trying to post videos to educate this planet. I will never stop. I will never stop. The industry has created me. I'm a product of the nuclear industry. And I stand for everybody and every species on this planet. I will fight to my last breath for every species, every human on this planet. I will give this nuclear industry 0 quarters. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next one. I'll put a link in the description for you. And I'm starting to get in the habit of putting the link in the comments section after the show to the songs that I'm using so you can find them. Because my comments section will disappear when the video is over for 12, 14 hours before you can find those links again. So have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.
Mode 1.
FCV 3-35 position trouble.
99% RTP.
One level still on program.
SG Loop 1 level on
Matching
program.
steam, opening to 37%.
DCS alarms appear in sequence. FCV 335 position or trouble. FCV 335 position deviation. Hands on manual controller. Feet to match steam, hold margin. One level trends down slowly. Controller 2 manual trim flow. Fisher type 67 actuator size 80. 2 FCV no 335 won't change state. Diaphragm cannot hold air pressure. Cap screws visible in casing joint. Movement demand no response. Vendor diaphragm material EPR 70. Specified torque values EPD neutral low. Clamp force uncertainty. Tensile overload. Primary tear at adjacent bolt holes. Secondary radial tears towards center. Receipt inspection not performed for FDR traces. Hardness, dimensions, hold template. Unverified. Level drop accelerate. T90 on AT. Controller 100% open. No recovery. Manual reactor trip. RPS actuates. AFW start. Feed isolation follows. All systems respond per design basis. 10 CFR 5073A, a reportable event. Public health, no adverse impact stated. Acceptance criteria rewritten. Diaphragm characteristics to verify. Dimensions, shore hardness, FT or signature. Bolt hole conformity. Receipt testing on arrival. Traceability to lot and vendor spec.
The birds washed up, feathers torn, scientists mumble. Eyes are worn, shake their heads, say what went wrong. Check the numbers, drag it along. They write their books, shake their hands, watch it sink into still melts and the tides still turn. The blob don't burn, the blob don't kill, but the fish still starve and the bones lie still. The blob don't kill, the blob don't burn, but the truth stays buried where the dead things fill.
They said it was clean, too cheap to meter. Built the dome, then cooked the beaker. Said the rod was safe as sealed in drums, but left them leaking out of Idaho slums. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. They chase the sun, all fusion proud. Ignore the barrels stacked in clouds. Promise stars in every socket, while curium settled in the market. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Chart is clean, while whales rolled up beside the submarine. Blame the algae, blame the rain, but never trace the gamma chain. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exceptionalism is done. Now the rods are rusting, the record spins. Mama warned them, too many sins. Keep your son, keep your lab coat pride, till you fix the waste you tried to hide. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear's not dumb. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear is fun. Hallelujah, being anti-nuclear has won. Hallelujah, nuclear exception